What radio? The music you want.
With your host, Keys Dan.
Friendless, brainless, helpless, hopeless.
RadioWhat.com. What's up, party people? It's Keys Dan, RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, coming to you live in living color from the Radio What studios, and this is my podcast, What Makes You Famous. It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, where do you go? DJLittleRock.com. Check availability, get a free price quote, and maybe you can have me, yes, little old me, at your event, doing your wedding, your corporate event, your karaoke jam. Yes, you could be the star of your own karaoke show. It's easy. Just give me a call or check the website, DJLittleRock.com. Today on the program, What Makes You Famous presents Lesley Sullivan, the Pawkeeper. I found her on Facebook, and she looked kind of interesting. But moreover, she called me and left a voicemail on my phone, of course. And it's the cutest little voicemail. She's so adorable. My goodness. And I've quickly let everybody in my vicinity hear this voicemail. And if you stay tuned, and I know you will, to the end of the podcast, I'm going to go ahead and let you listen to at least a good part of the voicemail. Lesley Sullivan. She is so cute. Just adorable. Let's see. This week's shows on Thursday, I'll be at the Old Post Barbecue in Russellville, Arkansas for the Video Dance Party Karaoke Jam. It's family friendly from 6 p.m. until 9 in the p.m. Yeah, it's a good after school treat on a Thursday at the Old Post Barbecue in Russellville, Arkansas. Have some good barbecue and some frosty beverages if you're old enough to imbibe. And I keep the music family friendly. So bring everyone. Bring the whole family to the Old Post Barbecue in Russellville, Arkansas. Thursday from 6 to 9. And then on Friday, I'll be at the Rab in Conway, Arkansas. This one is over 21. They have the full bar, the kitchen, the pool tables. There's a tournament that goes on every Friday night. So if you want to make some money while you're hanging out at the Rab in Conway, Arkansas, I encourage you, check out the pool tournament Friday nights at the Rab. That starts at 8 p.m. and it goes all the way till just about 2 in the a.m. Usually we cut it about 5 minutes before because the people, they just don't want to go. They're always having a good time at the Rab. And I like that. I like that so much. And I thank all the people that keep coming every Friday night to the Rab in Conway. They have a brand new shuffleboard outside on the party patio. You want to check that out. It's very cool. Oh, and foosball. I haven't played foosball in the longest time. They have a brand new foosball table sitting out there on the party patio. And Jenga, giant Jenga. There's always something to do at the Rab while you're having your drinky poos and listening to little old me play some music and do the karaoke jam. You could be the star of the show. Karaoke. It's easy. It really is. If you sing in the car, if you sing in the shower, you could sing on stage at the Rab on Friday night, 8 p.m. till 2 in the a.m. And then Thursday, of course, at the Old Post Barbecue, 6 to 9. And then Saturday, I don't have anything going on. So if you have any parties that you need some DJ services for, you give me a call. If not, I'll probably end up over at the museum. I think the whole family's heading down to the museum. Yeah, in Little Rock. Yeah. I just got turned on to some cool things that happen here in this fine state of Arkansas. All right, it's time to talk to Lesley Sullivan, the Pawkeeper. Calling Lesley Sullivan now.
Dan, how are you?
Lesley Sullivan, you knew who was calling.
Well, caller ID was a dead giveaway.
Okay, so from what I am understanding, and yes, Lesley Sullivan, the Pawkeeper, you are on a landline.
That is correct.
Okay, some would think that is a little old-fashioned these days. Are you comfortable with your landline? Do you own a cell phone?
I own a cell phone, but originally I started my business before the internet and the Facebook and the cell phones, and so that's a business number, and it's very hard to give it up, and it still works better than the string and the tin can, so if it works, why change it?
I understand that completely. I started my business in Miami, Florida, where I had a 305 number. And then I moved to Central Arkansas, Conway, Arkansas, and I had to give that up and change it to a 501 number. And I had the same number for about 20 years, and I used it as my business number as well. So changing is often difficult for a business, in that respect as well. So, okay, let's take it there. You're the Pawkeeper. And I have to actually say it in plural, the Pawkeepers, because I know that there are several Pawkeeper wannabes throughout the internet, around the globe, but you are the Pawkeepers. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think anybody that owns and loves a dog is a Pawkeeper anyway. We're kind of being kind to ourselves because we're really doorkeepers. Open the door, close the door. Dog goes out, dog wants to come back in. So it's a fancy name for a doorkeeper, really. But as long as you love and care for dogs, you're a Pawkeeper. You will get copycats, or should I say copy dogs.
Very good.
People like the name, and they can take it. And in this day and age, we have to learn to share everything, don't we?
I suspect. I think there was a Keys Dan in the UK. Oh, and that is a good segue. There's a Keys Dan, and I've had that moniker since I lived in the Florida Keys. Let's see. I think I started using that one somewhere around the late 90s. I've been a DJ since 86, but around the late 90s, I started using Keys Dan when I moved to the Florida Keys in 89, but somewhere in that area, it got stuck. And then there was a Keys Dan in England that found me and said, I hope you don't mind. I'm a pianist, and I'd use the name Keys Dan. And I said, wow, you probably deserve it better than I do. I can't play an instrument at all. So I noticed there's a bit of an accent. Maybe I'm the one with the accent. Lesley Sullivan, where are you from?
I'm from London, England. But I consider myself, everybody's got to be somebody. And so I consider myself an Anglo-American, because I've spent most of my life here in America and my childhood and teenage years in London, England. So I feel like I've lived two lives, and they've both been wonderful.
Well, let's explore both of those lives, Lesley Sullivan. Let's go back to the beginning, before you were the Pawkeeper, or have you always had a taste for being the Pawkeeper? Have you had pets since a young age?
Well, I've done everything that you could possibly do with dogs, herding sheep, racing greyhounds, chasing foxes with the hounds, So there's always been that element. And when I was a child, my favorite TV show was All Creatures Great and Small, and I would rush home to watch that. And I said to myself, when I grow up, I'm going to drive around in an old car and visit dogs. Well, I could have refined that dream a little bit better. I should have had a nicer car, but I did end up driving around visiting dogs.
Well, it would just end up with dog hair on it anyway. So really, a nice car, a not so nice car, it's all you need to move around. So
well, it's going to be covered in my favorite accessory, dog hair. So does the age of the car matter?
Well, yes, all the kids like to accessorize in one way or another, and you've chosen dog hair as your accessory of choice. I like that. So it takes a certain kind of person to be a lover of animals, a lover of pets. These are creatures that need our protection, and in return they give us love. Is that the experience that you've had with these animals, Lesley Sullivan?
I think we have a much deeper need for their gifts. We tend to baby them. We tend to treat them too adult, and we forget that they are dogs. I believe every dog wants a job. I believe there's a lot of bored dogs in the world. I think we tend to baby them now, and we shouldn't be babying them. They need things. They need us. They need us to give them things. And we've kind of lost the concept of letting them be dogs.
Yes, Lesley Sullivan, you mentioned back in your early days in England that you were sheep herding with the dogs, fox hunting. Is it hunting with the dogs, or is there another thing that you do with fox and hounds?
Well, I'm 64 years of age, but I feel like I'm 24 years of age constantly. And I used to chase foxes across the English countryside. Now it's not so popular, and, a lot of people are anti-fox hunting. And, in general...
How so? Why? It seems like such a staple, it's a tradition in England or in the UK should I call it England or the UK, or is it interchangeable?
Well, I call it England, or Great Britain. I like the sound of Great Britain or the British Isles, but you're not wrong on any of those things.
Okay.
It's all part of the same islands that form the British Isles.
So fox hunting, in my experience, dealing with it seems like it's a tradition in England, and they go together, it seems. Why is it being frowned upon these days?
Well, everybody feels sorry for the underdog, which is the fox. And this is just my opinion, and we'll probably get hell for it, but never mind.
Sure.
I think the fox has a fighting chance. It's a wily little creature. It knows how to go through water to put a pack of dogs off scent. It's used to running and being chased. I feel like you're giving it a sporting chance when you chase a fox. And it is a tradition. They're now going more to paper chases because, those poor little vermin foxes that raid your dustbins at night and spread disease. Heaven forbid they should, be cared for.
Well, okay, maybe that's a little controversial. I'm of an older age as well. I mean, I'm 50, not quite in a spring chicken as I used to be, but I feel good. And I think that is there use for the foxes after they're hunted? Do they use the pelts, for example, or the meat? There's some very barbaric rituals.
Oh, okay. When you're a young member of the hunt, you get blooded, and that's where they cut off the fox's tail, and they take the blood and they smear it on you, and they give you the fox tail.
Okay, and that becomes a rite of passage for a young man?
Yes, a young man or a young lady.
Young lady.
That means you're a member of the pack. You're a member of the hunt then. But, traditions are being changed every day.
Sure.
And we either have to accept the change or we remain in our Downton Abbey mode where we go, what's all this nonsense about?
Yes, there is certainly. Yes, go ahead.
It's interesting that the love of the Downton Abbey era and the royal family and all the traditions of England, they're so loved. But when you start to discuss some of them, people are actually horrified and they go against these older ways. There's lots of things that constantly change with the internet, and we're probably going to get bombarded by the save the foxes.
No, well, I like the constant injection of the younger people. We make young people, and they have new ideas. So it's not that they're wiping away the old ideas. I would hope not. It's that they're adding to them. But Yeah, I'm for tradition, and I've never been a hunter myself, but I'm not going to stop someone from doing it. I like to eat meat, and I know that meat had to come from somewhere, and I like to wear clothes that possibly were leather and made from some kind of an animal. So I think that leather came from somewhere, and if so, I think those animals need to be killed for our use. In one way or another. But I suppose if you wanted to, you could live without having any animal byproducts on your person, and that's your way. But I think most people use animals in one way or another.
Well, I think I've mellowed in my years, and I think everybody is entitled to their own opinion.
Sure.
But it's when you try to force your opinion upon another, I go, now back down. Wait a minute. Grit your teeth. Hold your tongue. Everybody does have a right, but no one has a right to enforce their beliefs upon another.
Right. Well, good. Okay. I think we're on the same page. We can have a conversation. And even if people are not of the same mind or the same thinking, I think you can always have a conversation. A nice civil conversation is always a good thing to exchange ideas. Maybe we can find that we're not so different. And I think there's a lot of movies, and I feel like there's a lot of English movies where, oh yes, Mr. Bond, we're not so different, you and I. Why did that just come into my head? Because I'm talking to a woman from England, Lesley Sullivan, the Pawkeeper. And I appreciate that. So tell me more about England, your early days in London and around.
Well, I'm a very private person, so I will be keeping a lot of my family issues, which there are many, because I was a rebellious child. Growing up, you were given so few choices as a woman.
Sure.
I can remember going into a restaurant and receiving a menu with no prices because I wasn't allowed to know the cost of my meal. And you weren't allowed to go out with your girlfriends to karaoke night. You were considered a loose woman. So I led a very strict, restrictive life. I didn't see a lot of life, and I was out riding my pony or my horse or going to gymkhanas and horse shows and playing with the dogs and chasing foxes. So it was a totally different lifestyle. But when I talk to American people about their childhoods, they were out running around until it got dark, and when the lights came on, they had to go home. So there's not much difference. There is a common element there. We didn't have the electrical goodies, and we didn't have problems in our neighborhood like they have now, and the clothes didn't matter. So as a child, I was alone a lot, but in the company of animals, so I wasn't really alone. But I had a lot of freedom in the countryside because there really wasn't anything to be afraid of.
Yes, this is 45 or 50 years ago in England, and I grew up in South Florida, in the Everglades, and around that time, about that age, 15 to 20, and I played outside all day. But I think the younger generation, and I'm not sure how it happened, that our generation stayed outside until it got dark, but the next generation, and I don't believe that the world outside is that much more dangerous than it was when we were young, but we feel that it is for some reason. How did that happen? I asked myself that quite a bit, Lesley Sullivan.
Well, I think also that, the children aren't as resilient now, and they are not learning to take care of themselves. It's a different way of living, and I personally would not want to be a young person now. I think there's a lot more problems for them to deal with drugs and guns and violence, and
Yeah.
all kinds of issues like what shoes you wear, what color your hair is, do you have tattoos? None of those things mattered to us. We wanted a cardboard box to slide down the hill with.
Well, I feel like that pop culture's always been there, but it really hasn't been as prevalent. I think you may be onto something, Lesley Sullivan. The Pawkeeper, and okay, you've touched upon it. You grew up with animals in England. All kinds of animals. I heard horses. I heard sheep. I heard foxes. I heard hounds. What other? Were you on a farm, or were you in the city of London proper?
No, I lived on a place in Chelsham, Surrey, and it was Featherbed Lane. I always thought that was a lovely name for a road, Featherbed Lane.
Yes.
And I would go at night to watch badgers. You don't have badgers here, I don't think, but badgers in England are pretty darn interesting to go at night and watch the badgers and the little pups and hedgehogs. You don't have hedgehogs over here. I was forever leaving milk and bread and waiting for the hedgehogs to come out at night. So I guess I was like a female Tarzan in the countryside of England.
Were any friends involved in this? Did you have a gang of kids that you went on adventures with, or was this primarily Lesley Sullivan alone?
It was Lesley Sullivan alone, and like I said, I was a bit of a reckless child.
Okay.
Always getting into trouble. I had a miniature Shetland sheepdog, and not very great imagination. I called it Lassie.
Okay. Hey, nothing wrong with that at all. That's a great name for a dog.
And Lassie and I would go off for all kinds of adventures, and there was one time, we don't get very deep snow in England, but we got some snow, and it was probably only about 6 or 8 inches. But I said to Lassie one day, wouldn't it be wonderful if we buried treasure, and then as the snow melts, we could find it again?
Yes.
So I dashed back into the house, and I raided the house of all the cufflinks and the watches and the necklaces, and went running out into the snow and tossed them in the snow and said, we'll find them tomorrow.
How did that go over?
To me, that they thought the house had been robbed,
No.
and so Lassie and I were hiding under the stairs because the house hadn't been robbed. We stole the treasure. We got into all kinds of trouble together, but it was a delightful childhood.
How did that turn out, Lesley Sullivan? Did you come clean?
I got caught, and it didn't end well. These are back in the days when you could punish your child without having anybody complain.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I think the paddle did me just fine.
So, as I grew into a young lady, I found that I became more restricted and had fewer choices. We didn't literally, decide that everybody goes to college, or as a woman in that era, I was given the choice of a housewife or a secretary or a teacher. And for somebody who loves running around the countryside with animals, none of those seem very appealing.
No. What did you choose, Lesley Sullivan?
Well, the choice was made for me. I was 17 chasing those foxes, and the woman in front of me hit a branch. It catapulted me out of the saddle.
Oh.
And I'm upside down, and my right leg is still in the stirrup, and the horse's hooves are pounding at my abdomen and my leg, and it was dragging me through a barbed wire fence, and it was a pretty horrific accident. So I lost a lot of my teenage years. I ended up with no kneecap in the left knee and having metal pins put in and lots of operations, and it was deemed that I could not bear children because of the pounding of the abdomen, which to me at the time never felt like a big deal, Okay, so I can't have children. It also ruined a lot of my marriage stakes because I couldn't have children. And so your choices become smaller. And during my recovery, I would paint little furry creatures and rabbits and ducks. I sort of just, if I couldn't be with the animals, I was going to paint animals. So I ended up going to the Royal College of Art to do watercolors and calligraphy. And there again, the present day, you can do better calligraphy on the computer than what I can, and it'll have no errors. It'll look beautiful, and it's quick. You don't have to wait for the ink to dry.
Oh, but it's the errors, the little imperfections that make it human.
Yes, I still think there's something beautiful about receiving a letter or an invitation that has been written by hand. I wish we would send one another's letters, because there's not much joy in going to get the mail anymore, is there? It's all junk.
I agree. Even email is all junk these days. A conversation with someone is a wonderful thing, and that's one of the reasons that I started this podcast, so I can learn from people, and I'm learning from you, Lesley Sullivan, the Pawkeeper. So you're a little girl in England, and you had a horse accident, and man, that sounds devastating. A turning point. What year was this? Do you remember?
Oh, good grief, no. The dates and the times sort of, it all becomes a little bit of a fog. I mean, I had to make a decision. What was I going to be in life? And a starving artist wasn't really the thing that I needed or wanted, but I knew I wasn't going to become this socialite wife that would do dinner parties and tea parties, because I wasn't a childbearing choice anymore. So what do you do with your life when you haven't got any desire to learn in university? And where do you go? I mean, I didn't want to end up as the secretary. That would have killed me. And suddenly one day there was an exchange student situation. The Art Institute of Pittsburgh was offering an exchange of a student from the Royal College of Art. So I said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to America. So I applied and got accepted. And the next thing I know, I'm transported to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh.
So mostly that was to get you to America, not necessarily for the art, or was it a little bit of both?
I think I wanted to run away from the choices that were being offered to me, because they were so bloody awful.
Correct.
And the adventurer in me thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to see America? And maybe they could put up with me.
Well, I'm happy you're here. You made it to America. Then what happened after you got to Pittsburgh? And you left your family behind. Do you get to see them or hear from them at all? And
well, the family is pretty scattered. I still have a sister that's in England, and everybody I know, because you've got Europe and England so close together, it's nothing to commute to France or Germany for your job. And everything's so interconnected now, so it's not surprising when people work in another country, and there's reciprocating visa systems, which England will work with Germany, and it's a lot smoother passage to go work in another country, except if you're in Ireland.
Oh, okay.
You want to go to Ireland, you must be able to support yourself for 1 year. You can't rent, you can't work, you really can't do anything except prove that you can support yourself for 1 year.
That sounds pretty interesting.
Pardon?
That sounds pretty interesting. How do you survive for the year if you can't rent anything?
Well, you can live with relatives or people, do au pair situations, but not for money. I don't exactly know the guidelines because I don't want to, but I do know that their rules are very strict, that if you can't support yourself, then don't bother coming.
That's the first I hear of it. Thank you for giving me a little taste of what that is, Lesley Sullivan. I'll probably look that up a little bit later and find out a little bit more about that. So, you were talking about the Europe being so close-knit. Perhaps I can get your views on Brexit, or maybe not.
Well, it's going to go on for a long time. There's pros and cons in everything. But I think when you lose control of the area you live and work in, you're always going to have animosity. And that's the thing that fascinated me about America, is all these different states, they were sort of self-governing until it came to major decisions, and then you all got to either agree or protest or change things. But I always thought that America was just so huge. How could Washington, D.C. and the politicians control all of these states?
Yes.
And it must be very hard if you're a farmer in Wisconsin and Washington, D.C. seems so far away, and yet they're affecting your life and your living and your home environment. So I see the problems with Brexit are very similar.
Right.
To all the different states in the United States. They want to control their own environment, their own jobs, their own schools. But they can't, because
it's the sovereignty. It's the sovereignty of the UK, of the British Isles that had been lost with Brexit, with the European Union, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I don't understand the complexities of who governs and who controls. Right. I thought it was all governed from a body in Germany, in fact, and England really didn't like that that this governing body that had no real stake in the UK was governing the UK, or was dictating a policy to them. So I think that was the reason that they left. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, like I said, it's complex. But
it is.
England is an island, and
yes.
There is not a lot of land. It's a small island. It's surrounded by the oceans.
Yes.
So you have to fly in a lot of things to England. It can't be self-sustaining. It's not big enough. So when you have a larger country like Germany, that they have more say in the running of the situation, it's hard to say, well, we did fine without you, because really you're needed because we're not very big.
Right.
We're mighty and powerful, but in size, we're not very big.
Yeah. At one time, the UK ran the whole world at the time, and it's hard to give that up, give up any of that. That's sovereignty, I suppose. You're right. It's very complex, Lesley Sullivan, and I was just asking a random British person about the Brexit and what you feel about that.
Well, I don't envision myself going back, so
Okay.
I kind of distance myself. I do love living in America, and I think it's an amazing country. The people are so generous, feisty.
So you got to Pittsburgh, the Art Institute, approximately what year, perhaps, if you remember?
I have no clue.
Maybe 45 years ago? Maybe
No, it was closer to 35 years ago.
35 years ago. Okay.
I was in my early 20s.
Okay.
Everything fascinated me. Driving on the other side of the street. The fact that there was no rules. You could eat anywhere. You could eat a hamburger walking down the street and nobody would frown at you. You could wear anything. You didn't have to change for dinner. People didn't form an orderly queue. They just rushed to get on the bus.
Yeah.
Everything was different. Everything was fascinating.
How was it getting to the restaurant and getting handed a menu with prices on it?
Interesting.
Yeah, you became your own person.
And again, the food was so different too. You know, there was donuts and there was pizza. I had to learn to eat these things.
It didn't take much to put all that rich food into your belly, did it?
Yes, it did actually.
Whoa, okay.
You know, I've heard of stories of people that have adopted children from foreign countries and their stomachs are not used to American kind of food.
Okay.
And my body, I believe you've got an internal thermostat. My body couldn't adapt to the Pittsburgh winters, which were brutal.
Not the same as London?
I didn't know what 15 below felt like, but I didn't like the feeling when I did feel that 15 below. And snow, I've never seen, feet of snow. And I was just totally fascinated and how people survive these different things. They take it all in their stride. So the food did bother me. We don't have fly screens on our window because we don't have the same kind of insects. We just open up the window and things don't fly through the window. So screens on the window were fascinating to me. Why do I need a screen on my window? Well, now I know. Air conditioning. I didn't know what air conditioning was supposed to be about because it never gets that hot in England. But thank God for air conditioning. That's all I can say. This summer's been brutal.
Oh, for sure.
And I think your body, when you're growing in a certain place, it adapts to the environment. Well, if you take that body and place it somewhere else, it goes into conniptions. It cannot adapt overnight. And I still struggle summers and winters in this country. I just still can't adapt.
So you're in your mid-20s in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, learning how to drive on the our side of the street, the left side of the right side of the street. I'm so confused now. I'm forgetting where I'm at here. So how are you sustaining yourself?
Because I didn't drive in England. I didn't have to drive.
Gotcha.
But in America, you have to drive to get places and get to the stores. It's impossible not to drive.
That is correct.
So I learned to drive in America, and I would put a cross on the back of my hand to remind myself which side of the street I was supposed to be on. And I had panic attacks. So instead of panicking, I had this rule: follow the car in front of you until you calm down. So there I am, merrily following the car in front of me, trying to calm down. And suddenly he pulls into this driveway, and I pull into his driveway. And he gets out of the car, and he said, "Do I know you?" And I said, "No, I was having a panic attack, so I was following you so I could calm down." And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Downtown Pittsburgh." He said, "Well, you're in Squirrel Hills now."
Okay.
And I said, "Oh." He said, "Would you like to go to downtown Pittsburgh?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, reverse out of my driveway and I'll take you down there."
Oh.
So he was my C&I car.
A nice man. How nice.
And that's the Americans I love. They once they realize that, you need some help, they're always willing to help. So I've met some wonderful people that have helped me out of some sticky jams.
I find that in my life as well. People are generally nice, and they're very helpful. They want to lend a helping hand, for if they can. Maybe not monetarily, because that's has its own problems. But certainly, if they need to lead you somewhere, yes, I believe they will do that. And you had that good experience with that man. That's great. I'm glad about that. Pittsburgh.
Well, I was living on this street called the Mexican War Streets, and things turn around in this country. It can be a bad area, but the buildings are old and historical, and it can turn around and become quite a pleasant area and gets revitalized. So the Mexican War Streets was one of those areas that was surrounded by bad stuff, but because it was old buildings with charm, it became quite a nice little area. So I'm living in this condo.
Yes.
One side is this person called Willie Stargill, who was a pirate for the baseball team.
Oh, okay.
And the other side was this person called Franco Harris that was a footballer. So I was in good company.
That's great. No,
So
I mean,
one
going to
time
Mexican War Street from Feather Bed Street in England. That sounds a lot more dangerous. But yes, please continue with the story. You had a Pittsburgh Pirate and a Pittsburgh Steeler flanking you. That's great.
Well, it didn't mean anything to me, so
Right.
I didn't understand who these people were. So I'm home one day trying to catch up on my homework, and suddenly I hear this noise at the kitchen window. And there is two young men trying to pry open the window to break in.
Ooh.
And I go, oh gosh, I better run and hide. So I run upstairs and I hide in the wardrobe. And I'm sitting there going, this is ridiculous. They're going to get in and you're going to die.
Right.
So I go back down. Well, they can't see me because of the position of the kitchen window.
Yes.
And they're still working on this window. And this is back in the old days when you'd have a dial telephone that was stuck in the kitchen that you could stretch the wire halfway round the room.
Right.
And it never went back to the same shape. It always looked ugly.
Well, it sounds like you
So
had
I
some good
grabbed-
windows, too, because they were having some problems.
So I grabbed the phone and said, I better call the police. So I dialed 999, which
Oh.
is for the British police.
Oops.
I didn't know that the emergency number was 911, and it didn't work. So I was beginning to panic, and I thought, I know, I'll call Eleanor, the real estate agent, because I know she carries a gun. So I call Eleanor, and she's out to lunch, and I tell the receptionist, it's an emergency, please can you contact her? Well, they're still working on the window, and I get a good look at them and the knife and their clothing and their hair and everything else. And I go, you've got to stop them coming in. You've got to find the courage to go up to that window and bang on it so hard that you scare them.
Yes.
So I'm counting to 3 and I'm taking a deep breath and I form this fist and I go over to the window and stretch over the sink and I bang on that window for all it's worth and they ran. So then Eleanor, with her gun, came to the house, too late, and she called the police, 911, and the police show up, and this policeman's there, and I said, you know, I'm a student at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh.
Yes.
I'd like to draw a picture of the criminals, and I'd like to draw a picture of the knife, and he said, no, ma'am, that's really not necessary. Let's take a description. So he said, can you give me a description? And I said, yes, they had knitting on their hair. So he said, knitting? I said, yes, very tight knitting. In their hair? Were they wearing a hat? No, it wasn't a hat. It was their hair. So I learned what a cornrow was.
Oh,
And
my.
Apparently the knitting that I saw was a cornrow. So I tried again. I said, please, can I draw a picture? He says, no, ma'am, let's stick to the description. He said, what height would you say they were? And I said, well, one was crouched over the window and the other one was standing behind him. I said, so the height is it's not easy to work out.
Right.
So he said, well, let's go with the weight. And I said, well, I'm guessing the one that was crouched over was about 8 stone 5 pounds. The one could be 9 stone 4 pounds. And he looks at me, he said, well, what the hell are you talking about?
Yes.
What did they weigh? I said, 8 stone and 9 stone.
Right. What's the hubbub? Don't you understand, officer?
So he's getting a little frustrated. And I said, well, I tell you what. I said, why don't you take me to the police station and show me photographs and I'll look for them in the photographs while they're still fresh in my mind. Well, I think he was getting very frustrated and wanted to get rid of me. He says, okay, he says, you don't know how many books of photographs we've got, and you're going to be there a long time. And I said, well, we really have to do something, don't we?
Why don't you draw them?
Off I went to the police station, and they bring in stacks and stacks of albums, and I'm flicking and flicking and flicking, and I suddenly go, that is one of them.
What?
And they all look at the picture and they look at the rap sheet and they see there's lots of burglaries with this person. And there's a phone call and somebody comes in and said, we have a pawn shop on the line. There's 2 people trying to sell Willie Stargill's World Series rings. I said, oh, that's my neighbor. So they look at me and apparently they had robbed Willie Stargill's place, stole his World Series rings and went to a pawn shop to try and get money for them. So the police are rushing over to the pawn shop, and I'm flipping through pages looking for the other criminal. And they only captured one. And so I finally found the other one and said, that's the other one. And so they got both the criminals.
Oh, my. That's amazing.
So it goes to court, and I doubt if your listeners are remember Perry Mason.
Oh, of course. Look it up. Find it on YouTube. Great show.
Well, I felt like star witness for the prosecution.
Believe it.
So there I am sitting in the witness stand, and the lawyer that's representing the criminals came up to the judge's bench and said, Your Honor, we have to throw this out. Nobody can understand this witness.
Oh.
And the judge said, she speaks better English than you and I. And he turned to the jury and he said, this is a case of to be or not to be. Do you understand her? And all the jury nodded.
Yes.
So he was a little miffed that he didn't get the case thrown out. So he came back to take another stab at me. And he said, and my maiden name was Wright. He said, so Miss Wright. And I said, yes, sir. He said, you think you're an artist? And I said, no, I am an artist. He said, well, if you're an artist, we're going to bring in a chalkboard, and we want you to do a drawing of your condo and where the alleged criminals were.
Yes.
And I thought, damn it, I'm going to do the best architectural rendering I can do. And there I am. I'm putting the sofa in and a little lamp and a potted plant. And I turned around and looked at my... who was behind me, and there were so many people intently looking at this drawing.
Yes.
And then I shocked the whole courtroom because I erased it and said, may I approach the bench? And they're all going, oh, she erased it. And so I spoke to the judge and I said, this doesn't make any sense to me. I'll draw it on a piece of paper and you can photocopy it and give it to the jury. I said, but I'm certainly not going to tell people how to get into my condo.
Right.
So the judge looks at me and he says, yeah, that's a good point. So I went into a little room and did my architectural rendering, and they photocopied it and gave it to the jury. So every minute was like a cliffhanger in this courtroom, waiting for something else. So the lawyer comes back at me again and says, Miss Wright. And I said, yes, sir. He said, would you say the lighting outside your kitchen window, was it ambient or ambience?
What?
And you could see all these puzzled faces in the jury, and everybody's going, what the hell is he talking about?
Right.
And I took a deep breath, and I said, sir, let me understand your question. You're asking me, was shadows created by buildings and trees, or was Perry Como outside with soft lighting serenading me? Oh, the judge bangs the gavel, and I go, oh, Lesley, you've just gone too far now. And he says, I'm calling a recess, and I'm going, oh, God, they're going to throw this out now because it's getting too theatrical. Mm-hmm. So I'm back in the witness stand, and the judge comes back in, and he calls the lawyers up, and he said, you probably don't know why I called a recess, do you?
Right.
And the lawyer said, no, sir. And he said, I didn't know what those two words meant. Didn't know the difference between ambient and ambience.
Yes.
And he said, her description is far better than Funkum Wagnall's dictionary. So he turned to the jury and explained that sometimes shadows and trees can create shade and change of light.
Correct.
And if Perry Como was outside in the soft light in Serenade, that's a different kind of feeling. So everybody that day learned the difference between ambient and ambience.
Oh my goodness!
And they didn't throw it out, and it went ahead, and the two criminals got 6 months in jail.
Hey.
And Willie Stargell got his World Series ring back, and he was very grateful. And he contacted Franco Harris and said, look, she saved my rings. She stopped them at your place. They probably would have done your place next. Let's say thank you. So they threw a little party for me, and they wanted to give me all this paraphernalia, and this is way, way before eBay.
Right.
And I was so English. I said, no, that's not necessary. Please give it to one of your fans. No, you've said thank you, and you've thrown this party, and that's very nice.
Yes.
I turned down all this pirates and stealer paraphernalia that I could have made a good pretty penny on eBay with.
I'm sure, but justice was served. Thanks in no small part to Lesley Sullivan, Lesley Wright at the time, and yes,
I was Miss Wright, the woman they were all looking for.
Yes, and apparently somebody found Miss Wright, so that might be a spoiler for just a little bit further into the future. But wow, what an amazing story! That is great. Pittsburgh had adventures in store for you, Miss Lesley Sullivan.
Every day was an adventure, because of the stark contrast between our two countries. We speak the same language, but sometimes I had to adapt because you weren't going to put my things in the boot. I had to remember it was a trunk,
Oh. I'm sure many of my listeners, including myself, are going to be looking up what a stone is. I've heard of a stone. I know it's a unit of measurement. I'm not sure exactly how much it is. And you have schooled, yes, I'm pretty sure that I just learned what ambient and ambience was. I know that I was aware that there were two words, but I wasn't quite sure what the difference was. And I'll admit that right here on the podcast, Miss Lesley Sullivan. You are amazing. You're teaching me, and you're teaching many of my listeners, I'm sure.
Well, I've learned an awful lot of lessons from Americans, and they've made me laugh. They've taught me to laugh at myself. They've given me great courage to try to be entrepreneurial and have that pioneer spirit. And there were the naysayers, but for the most part, people were very supportive of my sometimes wacky ideas.
Yeah, you were a young lady living alone in Pittsburgh. I'm guessing alone in the condo?
No, I had some roommates.
Okay, they just were not in at the time.
Right. They were working their lunchtime shifts as waiters and waitresses.
Amazing.
That's the other thing, is that it amazed me how anybody could work in a restaurant, because in England we have a few fast food places, but a lot of them in London are fine dining, and you really have to be a certain caliber to be a waiter at a fine dining restaurant. It's like butlers. They go to school to learn to be butlers,
Uh-huh.
So it's totally different. But you have family restaurants. We don't think children should be in the restaurants. We think it's an occasion for adults to go out and enjoy the evening. So there's not many family restaurants in London.
Well, I've been to some family restaurants here in America, and I've heard people complain that there were families making noise in the next booth. Did you know where you came? Do you know where you went to dinner, right? This is not, a fine dining. This is Denny's. Come on in and bring the family. But, okay, so many differences between England and the London area and the Pittsburgh area. So you were in a what you say was a pretty dangerous town at one point, but it got better?
I remember going to downtown Pittsburgh on a Sunday, and I saw this beautiful building that looked like a castle. So I went and knocked on the door and asked when the public was allowed to visit. And I was told that this is the county jail, ma'am. It's not a castle. And they had a little bridge, an arched bridge from the jailhouse to the courthouse. And I thought it was so adorable, this little arched stone bridge and the stone castle, but it wasn't. It was the prison. So wow. I didn't have much luck with their castle either. No, and I'm glad that you were just visiting. So you became an artist of sorts. You went to the Art Institute. Did you finish? And then what did you do after you got out of the Art Institute? No, I got into trouble.
Oh.
I went to this local bar called the Park Place, and there was a dartboard, an English dartboard there, and nobody was playing darts, and the dartboard was at the wrong height. And I guess it was just a cute accessory. So I asked the bartender, why is no one playing darts? And why is it hung incorrectly?
Oh.
And he said, we don't have any darts and we don't know how to play. And I said, well, we've got to change this. So I had the dartboard put at the correct position, and I had some darts and flights flown over from England to teach them how to play darts.
Wow.
And then they wanted to buy darts. So they said, why don't you put a little display cabinet in the bar and we'll sell your dart supplies and you can refill it and collect the money. And I thought, that's a good idea. So I started Union Jack dart supplies, darting paraphernalia to the colonies. And before I know it, I'm teaching all these people how to play darts, and I'm putting dartboards in restaurants and these places called after-hour clubs.
Yes.
I didn't realize that there were places you go to when the bar closes called an after-hour club, and you would continue your drinking and playing darts.
Right.
And then they didn't have a league, so I started a league and made myself president of the Golden Triangle Dart Association.
Lesley Sullivan. Lesley Wright at the time. Wow, very enterprising.
So I thought, this is funny. I came from England to become president of the Golden Triangle Dart Association.
So were you still in contact with any of the family in England?
No, we've kind of, lost contact. We sort of say hi on Facebook, but I'm so American. I'm so American now, I can't relate to them and they can't relate to me.
Yeah, I was wondering what they thought of you becoming president in America.
Well, I'd lost it. I just lost it. This is not how a woman behaves.
No.
So anyway, Union Jack dart supplies, I had an offer to sell it, which was one of those Godfather moments, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse.
Uh-oh.
And so I sold Union Jack dart supplies, and part of the stipulation of sale was that I wouldn't open a competing business because it couldn't have sustained more than one dart store.
I suspect you're right.
So, and I wasn't attending the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, and I really did need to go back to being a student to keep my visa.
Right.
So I thought, well, where shall I go next? And then I saw this place called Ohio, and they had a university, and I hadn't seen Ohio, so off I trotted to Buckeye Country to the Ohio State University. And there's a stark contrast between Pittsburgh and Ohio. It's two different countries.
Yes, I suppose you can look at it that way.
And so I opened Darts USA.
In Ohio.
Because I've given up with the British now, and I'm becoming fully fledged in the American way, so I couldn't be, Union Jack dart supplies. I had to go all in and be Darts USA.
Yes. And did you change your accent at all?
I can't seem to get rid of it. Must have been all those elocution lessons, a plumstone being held in the mouth, and you say, Papa's car goes rather fast.
It's so endearing. When you called me and you left a message on my voicemail, I quickly let everyone in my vicinity hear this voicemail because it's so cute. Oh my goodness, so adorable. In fact, at the end of this podcast, I am going to play at least a majority of your voicemail, not the phone numbers or anything, but I guess unless you want to give them that, but it's such a beautiful voicemail. It was so cute. And of course I wanted to have you on the podcast. Lesley Sullivan, I knew this was going to be fun, but I just did not know the adventures of Lesley Sullivan, Lesley Wright, to begin with. So you go to Ohio and you're Darts USA. What happens?
I made a very big mistake and opened up a store in Chicago and Philadelphia, and geographically I couldn't keep an eye on these places. I also lost a very dear friend who was like a brother. He became my manager in Columbus, Ohio, and he was going around to stock the bars with dart supplies, and he had the assistant manager's girlfriend in his car to help him. She was a ballerina, a student ballerina, and they wrapped the car around a tree, and so I lost two really good friends. Sometimes when things happen to you, it just takes all the oomph out of you, and you just need to recover.
No, that would certainly take the wind out of my sails, for sure. Lesley Sullivan.
I was going to dart tournaments, and that is not a healthy thing to do. You're competing. And every weekend you're in a hotel room, and then you're playing for prize money, and competition can get quite ugly. And it just wasn't me anymore. You know, I didn't like the environment I was in. And so I had a very good friend who was an accountant for the Columbus Symphony Orchestra, and he said, well, why don't you come work for the orchestra? And I thought, well, that's more me, you know, that's more my environment.
Yeah.
So I went to work for the Columbus Symphony Orchestra, and again, it was the best thing that I did for me. And my job was to sit in the rehearsals with my bagel and coffee and just learn about rehearsals and listen to music.
I want that job.
Until they found a niche for me. Well, the niche was fundraising.
Okay.
I was very good at asking people for money, and I was very good at motivating people. So I became the supervisor for the telemarketing department. And so I'd have 25 people, and these people amazed me. They'd done a full-time job throughout the day, and then they would come to the symphony, to the basement, and get on the phones and beg for money. It's not easy being a telemarketer.
No.
And it's not easy. You know, you're interrupting dinner, or people just don't want to talk to you. So you had to find skills to motivate these people to be upbeat on the phones and bring in donations for the symphony. And we all had a blast. I called them my rodents. Only I could get away with calling these people rats.
Right.
And I said, we are the rodents of the basement, and we are the ones that support the arts, and the symphony could not exist without us. So we're boldly going to pick up those phones, and we're going to ask for as much money as we can. And I'd do little prizes and competitions, and I'd run around the basement was in the theater they used it for ballet, opera, and the symphony, and they all shared the same theater. So I'd run around and find people, and I'd say, do you know there's 25 people in the basement begging for money so that you can give a performance? Could you come and say hello to them and say thank you? And so I would grab people like Reba McEntire and Hall & Oates and whoever I could grab, or a violinist, or, you know, whoever was around, I'd grab them and take them into the room and say, oh, look, we've got a lucky guest tonight.
Wow.
So I met a lot of interesting people, and I loved my little rodents, and we kept breaking all the goals that they set for us. And we had a lot of fun. And we raised money. And the deal was, if you raised the quota, I'd sneak you into the back of the theater so you could go watch a performance of Cats, or the symphony playing, or I'd find all kinds of ways to make them reach the goals.
How great is that, Lesley Sullivan? So your fundraising, now your life is taking so many turns. Okay, you're fundraising for the symphony orchestra. How long did you do that for Columbus, Ohio?
Many years. In fact, although I don't have such a connection with my family, I'm still connected to the symphony people, and still, you know, Peter Stafford Wilson, he's one of the most amazing conductors. He is a conductor of the Tulsa Ballet and the Westerville Orchestra. And he adopted me and called me his cousin. So that's my cousin, Peter Stafford Wilson, that's No, he's retired now, but he hasn't retired from conducting Tulsa Ballet. And so we laugh on Facebook together, and I'll come on and say, "Cuz, what's going on?"
Oh, well, I'm so glad that you made these long living ties with these people. This is great. So continue.
So, but like all good things, it comes to a point where you want to do something else.
Okay.
And you want to see more and go other places. So I thought, what's the next place over? And it happened to be Washington, D.C.
Okay. You're going to the nation's capital.
So I decided that I was going to visit Washington and sell artwork at the Eastern Market in D.C. and go back to being a starving artist and sell watercolors in D.C. So I packed the spotty handkerchief and moved on to Washington.
Lesley Wright Goes to Washington. Sounds like a movie.
And in the booth next door to where I was selling was a gentleman that printed on T-shirts, a textile artist, and he was also very angry about a lot of political situations. So he had these T-shirts which said, "Friends don't let friends vote Republican," and "The bitch set me up when Marion Barry got into trouble." So he had some very interesting T-shirts, and over a period of time we got chaffing and cozy. And his name was Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Walt Sullivan, and we decided that we were going to become an item.
Hooray!
Now, bear in mind, back in England with the hunting accident, they told me I could never have children.
Yes.
And they were right until I turned 40, and I had this hell of a surprise. I was pregnant.
All right.
How the hell did that happen?
Well, Miss Wright met Mr. Sullivan, and when a boy and a girl love each other very much.
And so I was over the moon because I never thought it was going to happen.
How amazing.
And it was the most wonderful experience to me, but I refused to leave my child with anybody.
Right.
And I told people, well, I'm going to run a bed and biscuit in for dogs because they don't like being in crates. They need their own place. They need their own house when they're away from their owners. And if everybody gave me $1 for the amount of people that laughed at me and said it's never going to work, I think I would have been a very wealthy woman. But no, I was determined that I was going to run a hotel for dogs.
Yes.
So that I could stay home with my child and I could paint and be in the company of dogs and raise my son. And that's when the Pawkeepers was invented.
About 25 years ago, you say?
Yes, my son is 25 on August 1st.
1994. You have a child. I guess you got married in that year?
Certainly did.
Oh, and in Washington, D.C.? And you
no, in Glen Burnie, Maryland.
Okay, just outside.
Yes, his father's house was and we got married in the backyard of his father's house, and they were Irish and I was English, and everybody said this is not a good combo.
Hey, in America, it all melts. You know, I was talking to someone, it used to be that the Irish hated the Italians, hated the Jews, hated the Spanish, and now it's sort of melting together. And I think there's only a few sections now with the blacks and the whites and the reds and the yellows. It's starting.
Well, Romeo's family didn't particularly care for Juliet's family, did they?
Right. It's starting to get closer together. Pretty much, I think we're all going to end up brown pretty soon. Just shades of brown or gray, I guess.
Well, some of us all have the same color blood, except if you're royal, then you have blue blood.
Correct. So
most of us have red blood.
So 1994 is a turning year for you. You become Mrs. Sullivan, And you have a
Yeah.
child.
And I'm a mom.
Oh, my
and-
goodness. How wonderful. And what are you doing for work? You still starving artist, or did you find something?
Well, I started to write books.
Yes.
And I started to learn about service dogs and veterans and how there is a great need for service dogs. And so I would board dogs and learn about service dogs and write books and make Pokemon out of Sculpey for my son because he thought it was funny to have his own little Pokemon made for him. And I'd print T-shirts, and I had one which said Pokemon, and he had all his little characters on T-shirts. So I was doing artwork and writing books and enjoying being a mom, and that takes a lot out of you.
Oh, I believe
when
it.
you're trying to run a business at the same time.
I believe it. But so primarily you were able to do this out of your own home?
Yes.
Oh, how wonderful.
People would love it because their dogs didn't have to be put in kennels and cages in the vets where there's other sick dogs, and I would be their little nanny for their dog, and they would show up and run around my house. And dogs are used to carpets and couches and squirrels and grass. So if you take your beloved pet and stick it in a crate for 20 hours a day, it's going to feel awful and it's going to get sick. And it's either going to try to dig its way out, or it's going to stop eating, or it's going to be breathing in the air of the other dogs in a confined area and end up with kennel cough. So for them to have an environment that they were used to with the couches and the carpets and the squirrels and the grass, everybody was very ecstatic to have a pet nanny to take their dogs to.
Yes. So in 1994, you started a business called, did you call it anything, or it was people kept bringing their pets to you?
This was the start of the Pawkeepers.
Right. But had you started a business? Did you incorporate this, or was this started
yes,
as a...
it was a long process because, again, we didn't have Google and we didn't have the internet.
Right.
You had to print postcards and mail them out or push them under people's doors, and you had to advertise in newspapers and magazines, and all that's gone now, so it's a lot easier to start a business now than the route I had to take. But most of my clients were referrals, and everybody was so ecstatic as to how their dogs were cared for that I really didn't have to advertise. I got plenty of work and taking care of other people's dogs.
And meanwhile, Mr. Sullivan, he's still making T-shirts, or is he helping you with this business?
No, he went to the Home Depot place and designed kitchens.
Hey.
Being a parent makes you do things that you really sometimes don't want to do, but you're a parent now, so you better toe the line and bring in the income.
Right. And he's got, the insurance benefits, of working for a nice company. So he can take care of his family. It's not a lot of money, but it's a living. Right?
But we all luckily recognize that when we bring a life into the world, we're responsible for that life. And most parents are good parents. They want the best for their children.
Yes.
And they are willing to commute for hours and go to jobs that make them unhappy for their children. And it's a rite of passage as a parent, I think, that you have to do these things to take care of your children. And you give up a lot of your own hopes and dreams. And I wanted to make sure that my son had a very happy childhood, that his mother was always there for him. And I resigned myself to the fact that, at least for 18, 20 years, it was his turn to be raised.
Okay. Yeah, that statement, and I've said it before in this podcast, that makes us all pretty much the same, be it Republican or Democrat or gay or straight. We all want our children to be safe and taken care of and have a good childhood. Yes, I think we're all pretty much the same in that respect.
Yes, having a child changes your life. You used to be able to watch a whole ton of movies from Blockbuster. You could get 6 movies and just watch one after the other. And then when you have a child, you can't finish one in 6 days.
You got that right. Oh, okay. So, Lesley Sullivan, you got the family, the bubble. It's all coming together. Where do you go from here with the Pawkeeper business?
Well, the house wasn't right. You know, you always want more. And I didn't like the traffic in front of the house. I was always worried in case a dog got out. And I had this huge sloping backyard, which I hated. The dogs loved it, and they made a track at the top of the hill, and they would run around the trees at the top of the hill and up and down the hill. But I hated the hill. You know, you'd look out the kitchen window and you'd see this stark hill, and it didn't feel right. It wasn't the Pawkeepers that I wanted.
Right.
So I started the process, and we were renting. I wanted my own home. I wanted my own little castle.
Yes.
So it took me 2 years to find the house that I love. And here it is, nestled in a little cul-de-sac. It has a double-car garage, and it's the cutest little Cape Cod you've ever seen.
Yes.
And it was a foreclosure.
Oh.
And the inside was awful. Ceilings with holes in it and dirt and garbage everywhere. But the outside, the bones of the house was so beautiful to me. And the backyard was huge. There was no fencing, but there was no traffic going by, and there was something. This place just screamed at me, I'm yours, I'm yours. And it was in a good school district. And so we made the plunge and bought the house and repaired it. And my son would use the cul-de-sac as a lake, and he used to get his fishing rod and pretend that he was fishing in a lake in the cul-de-sac.
The good
and
imagination.
I found that it was just beautiful to train dogs because there was no traffic, and I had this huge cul-de-sac to train dogs and people on how to, you know, teach their dogs to do amazing things. So it was perfect.
And that's in Virginia.
Yes.
Fantastic.
But now we have to move forward to the next stage of life. There comes a point when you're just too old for puppies and people.
Okay.
And you don't have the energy to train a service dog because it's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my entire life. You are working for 2 years constantly every day to train and mold this dog to become an assistant to a veteran. So it's 2 years of solid work, starting at 8 weeks until the dog is 2 years old. And you can teach it up to 250 commands, switching the lights on and off, finding the keys, finding the wallet, finding the remote, opening doors, picking up things, picking up canes, standing by the medicine counter to make sure that the veteran takes his pills, waking him up when he's got a nightmare. And it's really grueling. It's very demanding. And I'm now training my last dog for me, because over the years I've given away to veterans in need so many service dogs. And you raise these puppies and the need is so great, but it is hard to give them away. You've had them for 2 years.
Right.
So this one, the last one, and her name is Liberty, she is going to be mine because my crystal ball tells me that that hunting accident is really going to play havoc on my body and I'm going to need her. So she's going to be an ambassador for the service dog. She has 2 books on Amazon, Liberty the Service Dog and a coloring book. And everywhere we go, we're going to be doing a Liberty book. So I'm retiring from being the Pawkeeper.
Are we coming to the end of the story? Lesley Sullivan, the Pawkeeper?
So I have this wonderful site on Facebook called the Pawkeepers, and I have to tell you, every morning I get up with a cup of coffee, and I have so much fun with this page. You're not going to see anything political. You're not going to see arguments. You're not going to see snarky comments. All you see is hearts and laughter and likes and comments that make you spew your coffee all over the screen. So every morning I get up with such a joyful existence, and I read the comments and converse with the people on Facebook. And so what I want to do is make them all Pawkeepers, because they are an amazing group of people. And right now there's 35,000 of these people. And we're going to go visit some of them. Liberty and I will go travel, and we'll visit the schools, and we'll teach the children about service dogs. And my goal is to meet some of these Facebook people, because they have been my joy every morning. We laugh a lot. And when somebody's dog dies, we all commiserate. But the bond on there is phenomenal. If I don't post something for 2 days, I get these messages, "Are you okay?
Oh.
What's happening?" And so it's different. I hear a lot of negativity about Facebook, but I think if you find your tribe, you find your people, you bring out the best in them, and they bring out the best in you. So, and they've encouraged me to do the Liberty series, and so they buy the books about Liberty, and where's she going next? What's she going to do next? Well, we went on a water taxi in Alexandria. We got on a boat, and every time she goes somewhere, I make a badge for her. She went to the courthouse, so I made her a courthouse badge. And then we went on the water taxi, so she got her boat badge. So she collects all these badges, and she's got the grocery store badge and the theater badge. And so, because these are all public places that I have to teach her how to be a brilliant service dog. Yes. So we have to go places and do things.
Lesley Sullivan, you have had an amazing life, from England to Pittsburgh to Ohio to ultimately to the Washington, D.C. area, Virginia, Maryland. I knew this was going to be good. I didn't know it was going to be this good.
But you can't do it on your own. And
no?
I have met some of the most amazing people. And I call them my royal family, and it became a joke. I said, "Well, as I'm Queen of England, I will be knighting you all." So I have a Chancellor of Exchequer, my accountant, who is the most amazing man I've ever met, him and his wife.
Yes.
I love them completely. So he does my taxes, and he's the Chancellor of Exchequer, and his good lady is Lady Melanie. And so I started to collect a family, but they became my royal family.
Yes.
And I have, the person that attends to the royal carriages, and that is Sir Pablo of Bravo. And he takes his role as a knight very, very seriously. In fact, if I show up with my vehicle, he will tell people in his shop, "Wait, you must wait, the Queen has arrived."
Oh, yes. I've seen the pictures of you in your Queen shirt and the picture of the glass. You are the Queen of everything.
And they get into this, and I get into it too, and we have so much fun. We're all getting too old to be royals anymore. It's a younger set now.
I suspect.
But we've had fun with it, and one of the most beautiful things the royal family did for me when I turned 60, they threw a surprise party, and I went to lunch, and I knew nothing about it, and came back from lunch, and there's all these cars that I've never seen on the road. And I thought, well, what's going on? It's not Super Bowl Sunday.
Right.
And as I approached the house, they had festooned the British flag all over the house. And there were all these lawn chairs in people's front gardens, hundreds of lawn chairs everywhere. And I was told to stand in front of the garage and wait, and I could hear the sound of bagpipes coming up the road, and they gave me a parade. I had service dogs that I trained. I had some Marines. My son held the Union Jack, and his best friend had the Stars and Stripes, and they all paraded with these bagpipe players up the road to my house. And the person across the street, he was a trumpet player for the Navy. So as the sun was going down, he played Rule Britannia. And they had a cake that was like a wedding cake, but it was all British flags. And I had no clue what they were doing. And it was the most wonderful 60th birthday, and all the clients and all the neighbors were very gracious, and made sure I had the best 60th birthday ever.
You are loved, Lesley Sullivan, the Pawkeeper, the Queen. Just amazing. And you still have all these friends around you.
I know. I feel I should get tattooed on the soles of my feet, made in America, and a barcode.
Oh.
Because I feel that America made me. I wouldn't have been the Pawkeeper. I wouldn't have been the Queen. I wouldn't have been a mother. I wouldn't have been an author. I wouldn't have been an artist. So America made me who I am.
Well,
and I am always grateful for all the adventures and all the fun and all the laughter and all the great friends that I've made on the way. Well, and there's just too many to mention.
Oh, for sure. Lesley Sullivan.
We can't go through 35,000 names, but they're all wonderful.
No, and let the people know how to get a hold of you or how you want them to connect with you. And I'll make sure to put the links all in the show notes here of this interview.
Well, there's the Pawkeepers, where we hang out and make lots of hearts and smiley faces and laugh a lot. And like I said, we're all the same there. It doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter what your political beliefs or religious beliefs are. We all have one common goal, and that is to love our dogs. And I think we've got to learn to find the common goal. We've lost it.
Yes.
We've stopped caring about one another because we're so fragmented now. And we've got to find a common goal that just unites us. And I say, let's go for the dogs.
Let's do that.
Let's all go to the dogs.
Let's all meet at the Pawkeepers page and look at all the memes of various animals doing funny things, mostly dogs. It's just, it is a fun page, and I put a lot of likes on that page, and it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Lesley Sullivan.
I turned the two-car garage into a British pub, and there's dartboards, and my artwork is on the walls,
yes.
And now this house is going to be sold, and it's not easy.
Oh, no.
Because I'm too old to take care of it, and somebody else should love it. And I've got to go traipsing across America with Liberty and see all the people that I'd never had an opportunity to meet because I was always working with dogs. So
what did the boy end up doing? Your child, your man?
They struggle to find themselves. It's a different time. You know, employers aren't so intrigued with loyalty, so people jump from job to jobs, and I think the young people, I think we've lost trade schools. I think we've lost giving them, you know, you'd grow up and you'd be what your dad was or your mom or whatever, you know.
Sure.
You had some guidance in your career. Now it seems like they really don't know which direction to turn in. They don't know how to network because it's different kind of networking on the internet.
Yes.
My son is an enterprise architect. Now,
I'm not sure what that is.
Don't ask me what it is. It's not got anything to do with buildings. You get this certification, and they need these enterprise architects to get government contracts or private contracts because the enterprise architect maps how you get from point A to point B to success. They map out, they solve problems with the computer.
Okay. Sounds like a living.
And I probably described it wrong, but he is an enterprise architect, whatever that is.
You raised him. He's making a living, hopefully. He's out there.
Well, he's still struggling because there aren't, you know, the government contracts have sort of dried up a bit, you know, and people are struggling.
Right.
And he's struggling to get an internship, and even internships don't seem to be as abundant as they used to. Nobody's guiding these youth along the way anymore. It's every man for itself, you know. So I feel for the youth. They've got student debt, car loans, credit cards. We didn't have to deal with all that debt.
Agreed.
They can't afford to do things. And now they go into interviews in T-shirts and jeans because that's the way it is now.
Yeah. Yeah, when the CEO is dressed in the same clothes. Yeah, nobody wears suits anymore.
So I can't guide my son. You know, now he's 25, and
Sure.
he's got to forge his own path in life, because I haven't got a clue how you get from point A to point B now.
Well, it seems like hopefully he's making his own way. He's finding his path, computer or otherwise. And you and Mr. Sullivan, where are you heading?
Well, there is no more Mr. Sullivan.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Sullivan had dreams of his own that he wanted to fulfill, and we amicably went our separate ways, and I became queen of the castle and did my thing, and he now lives in Kentucky and does his thing, and that's life. You have to roll with the punches and learn that you have a son, and you've got to raise that son regardless of what your hopes and dreams are.
Lesley Sullivan, sounds like you and Liberty still have a few adventures left.
I hope so, because
Yes.
I'm not done yet, Dan.
No, you're looking to meet all these 35,000 plus fans on your Pawkeeper site. And I hope
And
you meet...
Liberty's got to go on a train and a plane and Air Force One, and she has to go visit the White House, and she has to do all these things, which she has to go visit Peter Stafford Wilson at the Tulsa Ballet and sit with the symphony, and I'm going to drag her everywhere. Maybe she needs to go to Graceland. I don't know.
Hey, I like Graceland.
In Mardi Gras beads. And she has her own site too, Liberty, a service dog. And so you can see where she has, from 8 weeks old, and all her training and how she's grown up. And the books are for sale there too. And let me tell you a quick, interesting story about how Liberty picked me. I have this wonderful breeder in Luray, Virginia. She breeds silver Labradors, and they're not common. You've got the black Labrador and the golden Labrador, and you have the chocolate lab. But these silver labs, somewhere along the line, the Windreimer coloring was introduced into the lab, and now it's bred as a silver Labrador. So she's special. And the breeder put up with my quirky ways. I would wear a T-shirt for 3 days and make it real stinky. Oh. And when the mother gave birth to the puppies, the puppy that went to the smell of the shirt was the chosen one. And it's a fascinating thing because there's no separation anxiety when you take the puppy away from its siblings and its mother, because they already know you. They know your smell. And so you're taking away a huge anxiety. And they feel like they've come home because they know me.
So smart.
And so we work together, and that's how it starts. It's just from the smell of a stinky T-shirt. And we wait for it's sort of like waiting for the white smoke to come out of the chimney. We have the chosen one.
Right, for the Pope. Oh, my goodness, yes. Oh, you've learned a lot in your years. Oh, about dogs and other things, but that...
Well, somebody gave me a pendant, and I was a little taken aback at it, because you can't really rattle the English, we're so stoic.
Right.
And it said owned, and I looked at this person and said, I'm not getting this. And they said, well, you think you own Liberty, and you don't. Liberty owns you. And I said, oh, okay. And it's true, you think you own a dog, and you don't. They choose just as much to be with you as you choose to be with them.
Very
and it isn't a matter of ownership. So I guess she owns me and I own her. And she has her own name for me. She calls me She Who Must Be Obeyed. So on her Facebook page, you'll see all these pictures where she's talking and she's going, She Who Must Be Obeyed. But she picked me and I picked her, and we're stuck together now for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. Sounds like you have a bucket list. You're going to be heading on a journey, on a train, a plane, on an automobile, and perhaps Air Force One.
Isn't Facebook amazing? Because you can see all these journeys that people take.
It is. It is amazing in that respect. You
get to watch the children grow up and their weddings and their events.
Yes.
It is overwhelming, but it is nice to see people retiring and fulfilling their dreams or starting a business. And to me, it's wonderful to sit and see so much of other people's lives, to be privy of their ups, their downs, you know, and to support them too.
Yes. And I didn't know, Lesley Sullivan, that we were going to be talking on such a turning point. You're retiring. You're heading into another chapter of your life with Liberty.
Yep.
Your
and we're
dog.
not going to the nursing home. They're going to
No.
have to drag me kicking and screaming if
You
I
better
have
believe
to do
it.
that.
You better believe it. Well, any last words for the people?
Learn to anticipate. Don't think that you know everything. Love your dogs and your kids and your spouses. And know that this is now, this is not forever. And let go of things. Keep good people in your life, but let go of things.
Thank you, Lesley
There you go.
Sullivan.
That's it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you talking with me on the What Makes You Famous podcast. And yeah,
Well,
you've had me smiling.
I know we were destined to meet and do this. I hope I can come back one day live from Alaska, where I'm looking at whales with Liberty.
Yes, give me updates along your journey. Thank you, Lesley Sullivan.
And I thank you for making this comfortable and not too squirmy. And you didn't dig into the deep parts, which make me squirm.
It's your story, and I tell people it's your podcast. You tell the story the way you want it to be told. Thank you.
And we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for Facebook, and that you were such an entrepreneurial podcaster who came up with giving people an opportunity to tell their story, because everyone has a story.
That is correct. Thank you, Lesley Sullivan. I appreciate you so much. The Pawkeeper.
Well, thank you, Dan. I hope this sounds as wonderful as it's been, and everybody can laugh at my voice and the different things that I've done and say, gosh, she really is one of those loony Brits.
All right, Lesley Sullivan. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
There you have it, party people. Lesley Sullivan. I knew that there was going to be a story to tell, and she had a story to tell, all the way from London and the surrounding, with the sheep herding and the fox and hounds and riding horses. She had animals, helping her and looking for badgers and what is it? Porcupines? No, what was it? Oh. But she's been an avid animal fan for the longest time, and she got out of that one-horse town London, England was 50 years ago, and she got to Pittsburgh and became an artist, and then got to Ohio and helped out the symphony, and then got to Virginia and Washington, D.C., and met her husband and had a miracle child. Oh my goodness, this is great. She had a boy 25 years ago. That's great. She didn't think she had children. Lesley Sullivan, you have had a journey, and your journey is not over. You have your dog Liberty, and I expect to be following you on your journey throughout your days, all the way to the end. And I hope that end does not come very soon. So when we're both 150 years old, we'll be chatting on the What Makes You Famous podcast, or however media is consumed at that time. Thank you so much for being on the program, Lesley Sullivan. It's been so much fun. I was grinning almost the whole time. Just a happy story. I knew it was going to be good. I knew it was. Oh, and like I said, I'm going to go ahead and put that voicemail on right after I sign off, and let people hear the cutest voicemail that I heard that led me to have Lesley Sullivan on the What Makes You Famous podcast. Thank you again. If you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you. Give me a call at 501-470-6386 or email info@radiowhat.com. That's it for this edition of What Makes You Famous. It's Keys Dan, radiowhat.com, djlittlerock.com. Peace. I'm out of here.
Good morning, Mr. Keys. This is Lesley Sullivan, also known as the Pawkeeper. Now, I say it differently because I'm from England. It sounds like I'm broke, which really I am, but I take care of dogs, so it's P-A-W, but I can't pronounce it any other way except paw, as in Pawkeeper. You will find me on Facebook under the Pawkeepers. I'm a dog trainer. I train service dogs for a living. I'm a published writer and have produced books. So I think I've had my 15 minutes of fame. So I'd like to be interviewed on your podcast if you're interested. I look forward to meeting you. Thanks.
This is Keys Dan.
And this is Shelly G.
And you're listening to
Radio What?
.com.